Hi guys, and welcome to my fan art mashup series where I figure out this digital art thing. I have a fine art degree and am most comfortable with a pencil, paintbrush or sculpting tool in hand, but I find myself awestruck and intimidated by the digital art scene. I finally worked up the courage to join in on the magic, and I bought myself a little drawing tablet. But as anyone in my shoes may know, the transition from traditional to digital art is not as easy as it looks. Instead of simply struggling on my own and beating myself up for making mistakes, I decided to be constructive. So I welcome viewers to follow me on my journey and learn from my blunders, and hopefully get the creative juices flowing. Let's start with the basics and grow together with the beloved sea princess Ponyo leading the way. While crisp lines are important, especially in the anime style, I find the perfection of the digital brush to be a bit jarring, and I don't like the textured brushes. But thanks to a tip I picked up from Mark Brunette, I just duplicate the line work and blur the layer underneath, and voila! The next step is to fill in the desired work area with a flat color. I usually use the main midtone and I cover the whole work area. That way, when you need to clean up your image later, it's so much easier. If you have any holes in your line work, there's no problems, and it helps to keep everything cohesive. Then I block in all the big colors and I get to work on the details. Oh yes, another thing I always forget to do. It's generally best to do your color palette before you get started, but I'm usually too eager and I don't bother with that. But at least I try to keep track of the colors I use along the way, because you never know when you want to use that exact shade again, and maybe you've shaded over it or you did something and yeah. So always on another layer, just make a little squiggle with your colors that you choose, and trust me, you'll thank me later on. Also, you don't want to have an over busy color palette, because that leads to disaster. It just is too crazy, especially when you're starting out. It gets a bit too hectic. Try stick to 3 main colors. So choose your favorite color, your favorite theme color, add a complementary color, and then add something else in for interest, and then get going from there. Yeah. I'm rambling now. Let's get back to business. When it comes to shading, I like to work with 4 or 5 levels of shadow. So the highlights, the midtones, a slightly darker one, and then your darkest shades. I start by laying down all the shadows, and I do each shade on a different layer so that I can make tweaks later on along the way if I need to. Then I go back with an even darker tone to intensify the depth further. This layers mode is usually set to darken or multiply, and you can fiddle with the opacity to get the perfect tone. But avoid black shadows like the plague. Try out purples, blues, reds or greens instead, trust me. Overusing black shadows dulls down all the colors and makes everything bland. If you want a strong contrast, layer these different colors, the blues, the reds, the purples and the greens, and you'll get it dark enough. You will. Just be patient. I picked up this technique from my painting professor at university. She would literally throw your black paint out the third story window if she saw it pop up in class. She banned black. It was dramatic and awesome, and you learned. I didn't use black paint for 4 years. But thanks to digital art, I don't have to wait around for each layer of paint to dry anymore. Creating enough depth used to take days the traditional way. Oh, so boring. Shapes are very important when working with cel shading, which is used in most anime design. So while your blending skills can sit on the sidelines, your line work will shine through. A ragged and unshapely attempt at a shadow won't do the artwork any justice. To get a feel of the style, just increase your brush size and follow the line work where your shadow should fall. Round off the sharp edges and corners, add a few cool shapes here and there, and hey presto, you got anime. I know most artists prefer to use the lasso tool for cel shading, and by all means try it out for yourself. I must be doing something wrong, because whenever I try, the effect is all jagged and quite horrendous. So I just end up going back to the good old-fashioned pen work. But give both techniques a twirl and see what suits you best. Okay, story time. Although Ponyo's story has a distinct Little Mermaid vibe, it also resonates with the Japanese folktale of Urashima Taro. As legend has it, when young Taro was on the beach one day, he saw a bunch of kids tormenting a poor little turtle. He begged the children to trade with him his freshly caught fish for the sea turtle. A few days later, Taro was invited to visit the Sea King's palace as a reward for his bravery, and the boy happily obliged. He eventually met the princess beneath the depths of the ocean, and Taro became so entranced with the girl and her fishy companions that he completely lost track of time. His underwater adventures continued for many moons before he finally grew homesick. Taro thanked the princess for her hospitality and was gifted with a wooden chest to take back home with him. But when he returned home, everything had changed. The roads, the houses, the people. Taro had been at the Sea King's palace for well over 100 years, but unbeknownst to the boy, he maintained his youth thanks to the chest gifted to him by the princess. If only he had heeded her warning and left it tightly shut. He may have had fun in the ocean, but he paid a heavy price. The moral of the story? Always keep your promises and remember what matters most to you. Sasuke definitely kept his promise to Ponyo, and he kept her safe as best he could. And he knew what was most important. Protecting the animals, protecting the oceans, standing up for what is right, and not just going with the flow. Back to the drawing. Your darker shadows should only go where needed. You must be selective. So wherever you want to add black, put this dark shade instead, trust me. Just swap them out. Resist the urge. Add a colorful dark layer instead. Another thing to keep in mind, if you're anything like me and you're just, I want to draw, take a deep breath and double check your canvas size before you start working, because if you make your drawing too small and you try and enlarge it later on, you're going to lose so much detail, you're going to lose so much quality, and you're going to kick yourself. I did this with my Midorivi, which is coming up later, and I basically had to redraw all my line work, and the second version wasn't as good as the first. So yeah, if you're going to print it, if you're going to print your artwork, try use 5000 pixel canvas size on the shorter side, and then you won't have to resize it. If you do need to resize, GIMP I would suggest is a good free tool. You can scale your image without losing too much, but just rather do it right the first time. It's safer. Another golden rule with the anime style of drawing is to vary the thickness of your lines. I'm still getting the hang of this, and I tend to remember this key factor only once I've finished with all the line work, and I end up creating more work for myself, but making those adjustments is definitely worthwhile. Basically, the outside lines that form the silhouette, they should be the thickest, and the inside lines are thin, and the subtle details are even thinner. Another neat hack is to thicken the lines in areas where intense shading is needed, or around elements that you want in the foreground. So for example, Ponyo's hair, the outline of Ponyo's hair uses a slightly thicker line than the fin that's underneath it, and that emphasizes that the hair is on top of the fin, but the hairline is still thinner than the main outline line. Generally speaking, I'm a girl who loves to blend, so this whole cell shading thing is way out of my comfort zone. But as you can see, I've tried to compromise a bit by adding numerous levels to my shadows to create a smoother transition from dark to light. Here I decided to keep within the color palette, and I used the same purple as before, but I changed the opacity and increased the brush size to create variation. The purple contrasts quite nicely with the red and yellow tones, and all these warm shades help to form a cohesive design. Adding in some blue or green may disrupt the balance, whereas another red layer would just make things bland. When in doubt, stick to purple shadows. They are always trustworthy. I don't know if you can hear my dog barking in the background. If you can, I am sorry. And of course, you got to keep those edges crisp. The eraser tool is my best friend when the tapered brush just won't cooperate. Next, place your highlights to brighten everything up, but not white. I tend to stick with cyan or yellow tone depending on the image. The rule of thumb is to use a complementary color to the main color of the artwork. This layer is either set to the hard light or soft light setting. Hard light is the recommended setting specifically for anime, but I find it to be very overwhelming and intense and daunting and scary, and I'm a blender. So you can try a soft layer light first and then amp up the major highlights again with a hard light layer later. Also play around with the luminosity setting. It's so much fun. It gives you a whole new dimension, but it can change your color palette, so proceed with caution. Treat your highlights like gold. Keep them in the eyes and the focal points. The same as black shadows. Too many white highlights could flatten your image and it could create visual noise. This layer can be set to hard light, or for a more ethereal glow feeling, you can try the glow setting out too. Highlighting is my favorite part, so it's very easy to get carried away. I try adding only 1 or 2 highlights where the light source hits the surface. Another nifty tip is to focus only on the foreground, as in the parts that are closest to you. High contrast light next to dark, it makes objects seem closer, which enhances the depth even further. So take Ponyo's tail for example. The fins that are further away have a soft highlight where the light comes in from above, but the middle fin has the brightest and boldest highlights of the 3. The same with the hair. 3 strands have the brightest highlights and stand out the most as they are the closest to the light source above, which creates a subtle 3D feel, but only using line work. How cool! Okay. Yeah, here I felt that I originally did the colors according to the anime, so Ponyo's face tone, and then I used Goldeen's body tone. But what happened was it ended up making Ponyo's face look like it was in shadow and it wasn't catching your eye as well as it should have. So I took a step back and lightened everything up a bit. I think it turned out much better than sticking to the originals. Now it's time for the finishing touches and any background adjustments. I'm not a fan of backgrounds and I rely way too heavily on my paint bucket gradient for this, but I'm working on it. Okay guys, I'm working on it. My focus only lasts so long, and background art is the bane of my existence, but we'll get there. I astonished myself by pulling off this filigree design, thanks to some assistance from Freepik designs. I think the classic Baroque feel relates quite nicely to the iconic Studio Ghibli vibes, and it ties everything together and gives Ponyo a well-deserved regal flair. I tend to get a bit hyper-focused when zooming in, and I need to take a step back and reevaluate my values overall. So I thought Ponyo's face was a bit too dark for my liking, and I went back in to amp up the highlights and emphasize her rosy cheeks. Anime girls just have to have rosy cheeks. Come on guys, come on. Yes, I'm bringing some more highlights. The light of my life. After everything was put together, I wasn't quite happy with the bluish turquoisey background. True, it made the obvious connection to the ocean, but I didn't feel the color choice was doing the artwork any justice. The middle part is blue, we don't need the outside to be blue. So I tried some different tones, I revisited my color palette. Let me know which one do you think works best. The pinkish purple warms everything up and gives it a happy mood, don't you agree? Let me know in the comments which version is your favorite. Thanks for sticking around, and I hope you learned something along the way. Don't forget to like and subscribe for updates on Cuddly Chimera's next digital process video. Which Studio Ghibli character would you like to see next? Princess Monaco is likely to crop up very soon. But September is going to be the highlight for me with Ghibli Fest. Double feature mashup with my favorite creations, Howl's Moving Castle and Spirited Away. Don't forget to touch grass in between your binge watching. Thank you and goodbye.